the transatlantic cable that connected continents, and the Panama Canal that made our world a smaller place. We backed the Marshall Plan that helped Europe regain its strength, and pioneered the ATM for cash anytime. For over 2 centuries, we've supported dreams like these and the people and companies behind them. So why should that matter to you? Because today we are still helping progress makers turn their ideas into reality. And the next great idea could be yours.
Değerli konuklarımız, toplum ve iş dünyası.
Distinguished guests, in this session, the solution suggestion regarding the saving the future of the society and the business world will be discussed, and the arguments will be the position of women in the future society. The moderation will be done by Selen Kocabaş, the president of the YKKD. With applause, we would like to invite her to the platform, please. Our panelists: Ecobank Foundation CEO Manlan, Insight Trade Strategies Principal Pope, founder and CEO of Women for Women International Zainab Salbi. Have a nice session.
Herkese merhabalar.
Hello to everyone. I believe this is actually one of the last sessions, and we will be speaking about the future of our societies. And we are together with the global businessmen, and we will speak with them. Of course, we will speak about different agendas. We will speak about climate, and at the same time we will speak about quality life and transformations in our lives. We will speak about women and the variety. And we have very important speakers and panelists. And first of all, we will start with Zainab Salbi. She is from Women for Women International. She is the founder and the CEO of Women for Women International. We will speak about the issue of women with her. Pope is coming from Insight Trade Strategies. He is the principal, and he will have a different perspective about the climate and climate change in the future, which parts of the world will be worth for living. Manlan, Ecobank Foundation CEO, and together with him We will speak about the potential opportunities in the Africa and the quality of life in the Africa. We will speak what can be done in Africa. Let me start by saying a couple of words. I am the president of this YKKD. I would like to say a couple of things. We are at the Uludağ Economy Summit. We are speaking about growth and development. And I believe the variety is quite important in that regard. I see many men participants, and I don't want to give any statistics, but when we take a look to the panelist profiles and the management structures of the companies, I believe women are needed even more. First of all, I would like to start with Zainab Salbi. I would like to say Zainab as a Turkish name as well.
Woman, you have gone through many difficulties. The Iraq-Iran war, growing up during Saddam's period. You know him personally, family friend, and you lead women transformation in your region, in your country. Focusing on that area, what do you think about the future of women? Will the same difficulties remain for the future, or how can be eliminated? How can be overcome of those problems? Is it a bright future for us for the future?
Well, first of all, what a pleasure to be in Turkey. And it's always joy to meet my Turkish friends and to have Zainab, similar friends. So everyone thinks that I speak Turkish. Unfortunately, I don't. But listen, you know, they say the 19th century was the century of ending slavery. The 20th century was a century that is of civil rights. And the 21st century is the century of women. So the way I look at it, whether we like it or not, whether you are doing something about it or not, it is our century. And there are practical, political, and economic and social reasons why this century is the century of women.
Good.
Now, let me start by saying, like, I use my own experience. And I believe women are bellwether for the direction of a society. Watch what is happening to women, and you will see what is happening in that country. A lot of times, politicians go to different countries, they visit one women's organization for 2 hours, and they say, check, we did women. Women's Day, everyone shake hands of women, give speeches, but really no one is paying attention to women. As someone who grew up with Saddam Hussein, as I said, you see how actually you can understand the history of my country, or any country in my opinion, by looking at what happens to women. And you need to actually look at it also, if good things starts with women and bad things start with women. Because we are the lower hanging fruit, so when people change policies about women, no one pays attention. So in Saddam's time, for example, he looked like a reformer publicly. He said women can wear whatever they want, whatever, but he never changed the law. Well, and then when we were in a war with Iran, he said women go and fill the factories because the men in fighting. But then he never changed the institutional change. He never changed the law to protect women. So every time, every era after him, it got worse. The sanction came, women now went backward, back home because there's economic pressure. Then the American invasion came and militia started attacking women. Then ISIS came and women went backward even more. Every generation, every era, had he changed the infrastructure of the society, had he actually empowered women, not only by him giving power, but by having the country giving power to women, we would not have gone through some of the things that we have gone through. Now, So women in Iraq, if I use my own narrative, went from actually having more rights in 1956 to now, 2008. We have less rights right now. However, after ISIS invaded the country, I was in Mosul few months ago, right after its liberation from ISIS, Daesh. And women over there and men said, we have tried fundamentalism. We have tried hating each other because we are this tribe, Sunni or Shia or whatever. We have tried oppressing women. Men are saying that. Men in government, in police, in normal men. We tried to oppress women. And we failed. We became our nuclear bomb. They are comparing themselves to nuclear bomb. It's not thrown chemical from outside, it is human behavior. And they're saying, we are the ones who destroyed ourselves. And now, this is Iraqis, this is people from Mosul, they are saying, we need to build a new human being. And women are saying, we will not accept this treatments anymore as second-hand citizens. And they're saying, we need to build new value systems and new human beings that we actually start learning from the beginning that this whole traditions and fundamentalism and oppression of women does not work. And so the way I see it, and this is only using my own narrative, we are in a pivotal moment in history right now. And our region particularly is in a pivotal moment in history. We have facts, we have records, we have data, and we have emotions. Every single thing is showing that we invest in women, we have progress. We have economic progress, we have political progress, we have societal progress. We reduce child mortality, we reduce maternal mortality, we increase food production, we increase peace possibilities, everything. So we can all rest and say, I have it okay, as Americans did for the longest time. They said, we are okay, we don't have women's rights issues. And now, as you see, most powerful men in America are being fired because they have violated women. And so no one is immune in this moment. I feel the world is already becoming a women's world. So if you're a man or if you're a woman, if you're a company or you're a private entity, you have a choice. Either get ahead of the game and be a champion in women's rights and reforms, or be forced to do it. But that's the trend of the future.
Okay, thank you. From Zainab, I will return to you, Carl. You are an economist, have deep experience in health, finance, project implementation. The Ecobank Foundation is specifically working to improve the quality of life in Africa. What are you doing to make this change happen? How should this change process be managed for the future? We started just focusing on the women, right, returning back to the quality of life for us, for human beings.
Thank you very much. I will actually, first let me thank Rauf for allowing me to be here. It's a story that I think is quite interesting, but not for this panel. But let me start from where Zainab started, talking about women. Women represent the majority on the African continent. They are also the ones that are actually pioneering agriculture, but the majority of them are still using a hoe. They're not using modern technology for agriculture, which is a huge problem, because the beginning of most societies has been about agriculture. So if you think about any country that is industrialized, they have managed to secure the agricultural part. Africa has not done it yet. So when it comes to the rights of women, or the work that the foundation does, and how do we see the future, women are centered to that. We focus on health, education, and financial inclusion because we believe that health and education are key in terms of ensuring that everybody has better access. Financial inclusion, today most Africans have a cell phone, and the cell phone today is like a bank. So how do we ensure that using digital financial services or putting more women on platform, they can actually take control of their own lives, being access to market, selling what they produce, even to the local market. So for us, it's not just being a bank, but it's also, when Ecobank was created in 1985, there was a clear sense that an African bank had a dual role, being a profitable bank, but also contribute to Africa's transformation. Now, key to these elements, we have to work in partnership, because by nature, Ecobank is a bank. So we need to be able to find, being business partners. In the previous panel, they were talking about how Turkey is investing in Africa. Yes, that's the business side. But how do Turkish businessmen look at the whole value chain in terms of how can they improve the lives of women by partnering with Ecobank or any other institution that is actually trying to ensure that the Africa we have today navigates toward the Africa we want. And the Africa we want is critical because the majority of young people in the world will be Africans. So it's not an African problem, it's a global problem that we need to address. So Ecobank Foundation, it's about partnership. It's about ensuring that all the investment that is coming from Africa, because actually Africans do invest in their own economies, but also money that is coming from outside, is used to improve the lives of people in different levels. The one which is most important is how do we move from a society that still cannot feed itself to a society that can do so. And I think we have a good example of how Turkish businesses can actually help us go through that transition. Thank you.
Maybe there will be some potential for the future to have some partnership with Thai Group. At the textile business.
Definitely.
Because they will need human capital for their business to run in Egypt, in Algeria, those areas. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, returning back to Karl Pope. Dear Karl, you approach climate change with a different perspective. You are focusing on the links between sustainability and economic development. As a senior climate advisor, what specific actions, in your opinion, the society and the business community be taking in order to save the future? How much do you think that we already started to do that?
Well, I think the important thing to understand about the climate issue today, which is different than it was 20 years ago, is this is not a question of who's going to pay the bill if we solve it. Solving the problem will not come with the bill. Solving the problem will come with the check. Because we have entered an era in which replacing high carbon technologies with low carbon technologies across the board over the next 20 years is going to make people richer, not poorer. It's going to make them healthier, and it's going to make their economies more secure and less vulnerable to external disruption. I'll give you a couple of examples. This year, in 4 or 5 countries, 20-year contracts will be signed to provide electricity at less than 3 cents a kilowatt hour. That is the cheapest electricity in human history. And the societies that build the most renewable energy over the next decade are going to be the societies with the most competitive power sectors. And incidentally, the studies that have been done so far, and more should be done about Turkey, indicate that Turkey has enormous renewable energy potential, which would meet its energy needs more effectively, cheaper, and most definitely with better public health outcomes than continuing to rely on fossil fuels. A second example, we all drive around using cars and trucks, and we power those cars and trucks with oil and gas. From an economic point of view, if you're Saudi Arabia or Venezuela, that isn't a big problem. But if you're most countries, that oil and gas, or a good portion of it, has to come from somewhere else. And a major part of your current accounts deficit problem is going to be paying for that oil and gas. And every time the markets get it wrong or the producers decide that it's time to raise the price, your economy is going to take that kind of a jolt. And your growth is going to be stalled out. You have an alternative. You have an alternative. You can make your transportation systems more reliant on rail and less reliant on road. You can begin to electrify vehicles. You can insist that auto manufacturers use the latest technology in the cars and trucks they sell so that they will waste less gasoline. And over time, A, you will use less gas, so if it does get expensive, it won't hurt you as badly. But B, if all of the countries that import fossil fuels for transportation were to make their transportation systems higher performance, the price of oil would fall to a level that you really wouldn't have to worry about it very much. And Turkey could be a really big winner. At the peak of the oil crisis, when oil was at $142 a barrel, Turkey was taking the largest hit on its GDP from the price of oil of any country in the world. Now, things are much better now. Oil is not $142 a barrel. It's about half of that. But it could easily go back, and unless we begin replacing it in transportation, it will go back. A third example. We're going to build an enormous number of buildings in the world in the next 20 years. We're going to build more buildings in the next 20 years than we have built in the last 200. So everything we've built in the last 200 years, we're going to duplicate in the next 20 years. Mostly in places like the Eastern Mediterranean, Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia. Not mostly in Europe and the United States. But there's going to be enormous growth. There is no economic reason why any one of those buildings should have a utility bill. All of those buildings should be able to provide their own electricity, their own heating, and their own cooling from affordable technologies installed into the building when it was built. And these new net zero buildings, these buildings that don't have utility bills, do not cost more once a country starts building a lot of them. So what are the big challenges? If the technology is there, if it's actually cheaper to solve the climate crisis than it is to continue to allow it to get worse, why aren't we getting there? And I want to close by saying the fundamental problem is everything that needs to be done to solve the climate problem is being done somewhere. Probably most of it is being done somewhere in Turkey. But none of it is being done at a large enough scale to bring down the price where it ought to be, or where it can solve the climate problem, or where it can end the curse of air pollution, or where it can bring oil back to $20 or $30 a barrel. So the benefits of an innovative low-carbon economy are simply being denied to us because we're not willing to reach out with our hands and pick it up.
Okay. Today we all discuss about the digitalization, the new technology, the benefit from them to save the energy and get the benefit from all of this investment. And you directly linked in order to be sustainable, we have to use the benefit of the new era, the benefit of the new world. I'm returning back to Zainab. As we mentioned, the benefit for the new world, benefit for the new women and for the new man. You had many efforts for women in the war zone. You helped women regain their self-confidence and stand on their feet. How do you think the role of women will be different for the future in shaping the society, both in the economy and in the business world?
So the last time I spoke was more making, this is the women's century, they're calling it, and I'll try to give you facts and some records about why is that. So let's talk about war and peace, which is something that I worked on for all my life. I grew up in war and I lived and I worked in war, from the Bosnia War to Rwanda, Congo, Sudan, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and many others. Now, in all peace agreements, when peace agreements, peace negotiations include women and civil society generally, it is 64% less likely to fail. Often because, and when women particularly are included in peace negotiation and signing, a peace agreement is 35% more likely to last for 15 years. This is big. This is big. So why is that? Often, women, not often, always actually, women define peace as not only ending of the fighting. Most of the times, peace agreements are negotiated by the fighters themselves, the fighting parties. So the negotiation is about letting the fighting down, stopping the fighting, right? Well, women define peace not by stopping the fighting only. They define it by, we want more employment, we want better schools, better roads, better housing, better electricity, better services. That's how they define peace. It's about stability of life because that's what they are concerned about. How can I stabilize my family? And so every time they're included, they make sure that actually these details are working. When they are not included, and for the records, they have been included only 2% of all peace negotiation. 2% only, even though we actually have a very good records for the impact of women's impact. 8% they have been included, 2% signing peace agreement, 8% in the peace negotiation itself. And so we really need to learn. I mean, a lot of men say, well, why do I include women? Well, I don't understand. Or a lot of men saying, I'm trying to include women, but I can't find them. The thing is, you need to learn how that women communicate differently. Not all women have the language of the business records and all of these things. Sometimes they communicate in different ways. Not less, not more, not less important, not more. I don't believe women are superior to men. Women and men are the same for me. But we need to learn how to listen and hear each other in different ways. A village woman may have a lot of wisdom of what she has to say about peace. We need to hear her. A woman who may not be very politically aware of how the language of politics also knows, and we need to, because she has access to the community. So that's just on peace. Now let's talk about the economy. Goldman Sachs 10 years ago issued a paper saying, and I personally was in that launching of paper with the chairman of Goldman Sachs saying, look, we are not a gender organization. We don't care about women's issues, but we are in the business of the future. And the future is telling us, our record shows, women are, it's all in small and medium businesses, and women are the majorities of people in small and medium businesses. Right? So this is 10 years ago. The records already are showing that. Women already have 30% of private wealth in the world. That is about $40 trillion. An estimated growth in this region alone is 10% of women's wealth. So here's what women, at least in America, are saying. They're saying, look, we are now aware of the wealth we control, and we now aware of our growth and the correlation between our participation in the market and between a national growth. So this is what they're saying, and that includes Sally Krawcheck, who was one of the top business in Wall Street. She's saying, if men are not going to include us in the decision making, because we need to be included, we're going to take our wealth and create it separately. And that is not good. To have a war between women and men is not a good thing for any of us. Right? So you have a peaceful argument why it's good to include women. You have a business argument why it's good to include women, not only of what I told you, but actually what we have in terms of board memberships of women, decision-making in companies with women. It's all correlated to its growth. Everything. We have the records and the facts. What we don't have is actions yet. We still give nice speeches, but we don't have the actions yet. Now, for me, it's how do we do that? Do we force ourselves, like in the States, with the Me Too movement, men in particular are being forced to do it because they're being fired right now for mistreating women. Do we wait to be forced to do that, for a crisis to happen, or do we get ahead of it and say we're going to be proactive about fixing this issue? But last but not least, because yes, there is a political reason, yes, there is a peaceful reason, yes, there is an economic reason, but to quote Christine Lagarde, who 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., this is the head of the IMF, to quote her, she said, what we really need the most in today's world is love. That's Christine Lagarde saying that. If I tell you that, you probably roll your eyes. But it is Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, and she is right. We need love in this time, in a divided time, in a time of anger, in a time of division between all of us in every country, within the country and outside the country. And women do hold that love. Men hold it too. But women are also the source of that love. And perhaps it is time for us to take a proactive step to hear the words of women for all our sake, not only for women's sake, for all our sakes. We grow together and we go backward together. So it's up to us.
Thank you. Şöyle bir katkıda bulunmak isterim. Zeynep'in söylediği sözlere. Söylemek değil, aksiyona geçmek son derece kritik. Türkiye'de kadınların yönetim kurulu oranlarına baktığımızda biz 100'da toplam rakam 4 sene önce %12.
The total number, the total ratio is 14%. So there are very tiny steps within 14%. It's good to have a 14% of women, but 50% of them are the family members in family companies. So placing quotas and following the quotas is very critical. By placing the quotas, of course, we are not going to place the insufficient people. We will be placing the sufficient people in the right places in the right time.
We just discussed about the situation in Africa and the potentials in Africa. If we zoom out from the specifics, what are the biggest problems areas right now? The issues in the world that you see, and what we have to do to fix them, and who will be in charge of them?
So if I take Carl's point around renewable energy, we are often criticized on the African continent that we want to go the same way as Europe has industrialized, by polluting. But we can use renewable energy to actually power agriculture, but also buildings, as you were mentioning, but also industrialization. It is possible to do so. If I now look at the role of women in society and the future of work and the skills that are required in the future, people speak about empathy, they speak about problem-solving skills that many people have to learn at home. But our current society does not attach any value to the work that women are doing at home to raise children. So if a spouse is, let's say, not working, there is no values attached to it. So once I was listening to the Liberian Nobel laureate, who during the war, the end of the war in Liberia, she was talking to a pastor, and she asked the pastor, how much do you think it would cost you if you didn't have a wife at home? And he started listing all the things that his wife does. At the end of the list, he realized that she was making technically more money than him by taking care of the children, by washing the dishes, by cooking, by taking care of the house. But there's no value which is being attached to this. So in terms of the future of society and the future of work, we have a problem. Because at the moment, there are women that are actually giving those skills to what we need for the future, but we're not attaching any value to it. My second point is around Turkey itself, where Turkish investment in Africa grew from $100 million about in 2003 to about $6.5 billion in 2017. Turkish businesses have created 78,000 jobs in Africa. So the future of the world is in Africa. Not because I'm African that I'm saying this, but we just have to look at the statistics and the demographics. So if we really want the future of the world to be growing, we need to look at Africa. And to ensure that all these young people today that are jobless find a job. Because if they don't, we'll continue to see a lot of the problems that continue to challenge our governance system. because they don't have what they're looking for. The second point, which I think is important, is around rural infrastructure. There's a lot of talk about 50% or probably more of the world moving into cities. But what about the rest? The 45% potentially that will remain in rural areas. They will be the one focusing on agriculture. They will be the one that need the kind of infrastructure that was built by government, thinking of a post office system. But nobody is really looking at infrastructure in rural areas because they are not clients. 60% of the world GDP is spent on consuming. Well, they're not seen as consumers. Therefore, nobody is really looking at that. But it's a real challenge because we know that most of the cities are coastal cities. And with climate change, you're unlikely to have the same cities the way they are today. So what is happening to the rural areas? The other point is around artificial intelligence. A lot of people are scared about it, but all of us are using it every day. Predictive text is a form of artificial intelligence. And what does it mean in terms of all the data that we have? We look at the Facebook scandal and how it's been used, but we can use the same data to actually try and understand patterns, being for disease, being for movement of people, and how do we resolve those issues around migration. Migration is another important element. When people speak about migration, they look at the number of people dying in the Mediterranean Sea, but it's a fraction, and I'm not saying this in terms of not respecting those who die. But if you look at the number, majority of migration in Africa is internal migration. It is not external migration. That brings then the question around how do we ensure that those migrating in Africa have the jobs that they require to actually sustain the continent. My last point is around a concept which is not new, but we have not yet exploited it. Everyone has a cell phone today. It means that technically, if we find a way to strengthen foundations on the continent, civil society on the continent, anyone, anywhere could actually pay for results to improve the life of a child, to improve the life of a woman, and to make sure that the African continent that will grow by 2.4 billion by 2050, currently we are 1.2, will be 3.6 billion people, actually is helping the rest of the world to stabilize. Thank you.
Thank you. Your views are a base for Carl's comments. I have two questions right now. According to your view, which cities are already successfully doing actions to create more livable world right now? And the second one, which regions do you think will be more populated in the world? And what we have to do right now to shape the future of those places? Thank you.
Well, I want to go back to you. I want to start with your last question because I said I don't think you can view the problems of climate or the environment or sustainability anymore as economic problems. They're not. We have the solutions. They're not really political problems we would all gain from moving forward in a better direction. They are, I think, ethical problems. And there are three key ethical choices that in particular the business community in whichever country faces. One, we need to invest in, not in privatizing things, but in, I guess I would make up a word, publicating them. We need to be investing more in things that benefit all of us collectively, whether we do it through the private sector, which we should in many cases, or through the public sector, which we also do. Because the most effective tools that are not being used are tools that benefit everybody, that create public goods like education, women's empowerment, public health, resilience for cities. In fact, probably one of the single most cost-effective investments available in the world is to replant an acre of mangroves. It costs about $10 and it probably yields about $10,000 in present value benefits. It's the highest ROI we can get. It's not happening anywhere because everybody gets the benefit. The second key principle, we have to look for the future. We're going to need much more finance to build all this infrastructure that we've all been talking about. We're going to need much more finance to bring women into the workforce and to execute the kinds of changes that Zainab talked about. That's the job of finance. But it's long-term finance. It's not short-term finance. So what we need is for the financial sector to change its time horizons to meet the world we live in. And finally, and this is something that I don't think I really need to say in the region of Istanbul, we need to recognize the world is a diverse place and it is constantly changing and mingling, and we need to welcome that diversity. Now, all three of those ethical principles, unfortunately, there's a very easy way to know how you're doing them. Look at the leaders of my country and do the opposite. The United States right now is providing the world with a searingly vivid example of what not to do. Please, whatever you do, don't do as we say or do these days. And I want to close with a story that I think captures these three principles. The highlight of my day was I was driving from the airport to this conference, and I drove past a project which I saw when it was being born along the freeway. It's the Nehat Jokovic tree arboretum. It's an arboretum. It's built, as many of you know, in the middle of a freeway cloverleaf by one of Turkey's leading industrialists. And he built it as a monument to his wife. I saw it 12 years ago, and I thought, what an amazing concept. And I saw it today from the freeway, and I thought, what an amazing project, what an amazing outcome. But in order to do that, Nehat had to do those three things that I mentioned. First, he took a private grief, the loss of his wife, and he used it to broaden the public space that was available to the children of Istanbul. Second, by building a botanical garden oriented towards children, he guaranteed, since he was about 80 when he did this project, that he would see only a tiny fraction of the benefits. In fact, most of the children whose lives would be changed by this garden would not be born when Nehat finally passes. He's still, thank God, kicking strong at 93. And third, in doing it, he very consciously celebrated the diversity of the Anatolian plateau. He made sure that every species of oak tree in Anatolia was there. And I think that looking at that botanical garden, and that's the counterexample to what's happening in the United States right now. And I would just urge all of us as we drive past that botanical garden on the freeway to think about what he accomplished and what each of us can accomplish to strengthen the public space, to change our time horizons further into the future, and to celebrate the diversity which, whether we like it or not, is coming. Thank you.
Çok teşekkür ederim sevgili Zeynep, Salbi, Manlan ve Pop'a. Vaktinde bitirdiği.
We finished on time. Well, we actually tried to talk different topics like diversity and sustainable. We finished our session. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.
Değerli panelistlerimize çok teşekkür ediyoruz.
We would like to thank to our panelists.
We appreciate it. Evet, sıradaki oturumumuz.
The next session is the Banking, the Future of Finance. Our sponsor is Borsa Istanbul. In this session,